to the Lezlie Show. Woohoo! Hey, I have to tell you guys a little secret. I'm actually going to be having gallbladder surgery next week. Can you believe that? Well, the first thing the doctor asked me is, are you able to deal with pain very well? And I said, of course I can. I've been married for 30 years. What do you think? Yeah, my husband tells everybody it's cheaper to keep her. Yeah, wait till he gets all the bills from the hospital. He won't be saying that anymore. Just kidding around. Anyway, today we are going to be talking about wine. A lot of you out there probably love to drink wine, but you have no idea the process involved in making the wine. So we have Dr. Fred Carbone with us today. He's with the Central Coast Home Vintners Association. So let's give a nice welcome for Fred Carbone. Woohoo! Dr. Carbone, it's a pleasure to have you on my show today.
Thanks, Lezlie. It's a pleasure to be here, but you can call me Fred, okay?
Fred, okay, you got it, Fred. So, Fred, tell me about the wine business. How did you get into wine? I hear that you're the president of the wine club, and how did you get into that, and how long have you been into it?
Well, first off, I'm not a professional winemaker, okay? I make wine as a hobby, okay? I started making my first bottle of wine, I think it was about 2004, 2005, and then we planted the vineyard at our house at 2006. The reason I got into it probably had to do with my granddad. I'm an Italian family, so we grew up drinking wine on special occasions. And my natural grandfather passed away, so my grandmother remarried. And the gentleman she married was originally from Sicily, but his family was brought over by Rutherford Vineyards to manage their vineyards up in Napa Valley. So they had 5 acres of Cabernet Sauvignon grapes that they were growing just outside of St. Helena. And every year, Rutherford bought those grapes to put into their private reserve wine. So when he married my grandmother, he said, well, instead of paying me for the grapes this year, why don't you just give me some bottles of the wine that you made a couple years ago, and I'll serve them at the wedding. And that's what he did. He served the wine at the wedding with a nice picture of him and my grandmother on it. And then I was only, 10 or 12 years old, but they kept a few cases. So every year on their anniversary, they would open a bottle of that wine. And it just got better and better and better. So I always had the vision of making wine that I'd grown and serving it at my kids' weddings. So, my boys right now are 22 and almost 20. So we got a little ways to go, but I'm getting a little bit better at it. So we'll be ready when they are.
Okay, well, you're the president of the wine club, right?
Yes,
the
I am.
Central Coast
Yes.
Wine Club. So tell me about that. Did you start the club? Or?
No. The Central Coast Home Vintners Association has been around probably for about 20, 25 years. It's really, we have members. At the end of every year, we have about 100 members, and they're from up in Paso, clear down to LA. Okay, so memberships are couples, so there's probably about a little under 200 people in the club.
Okay, so what are the people like? Do you have like all different ranges, like young people or older?
Oh yeah,
or what?
Absolutely. There's really no typical home winemaker. I mean, we have members in our club that have vineyards like I do and make their wine from that. Others have very elaborate wine cellars. Others make just a few gallons every year with friends. Some people don't make any wine. They just like to come to our events. So pretty much room for everybody in that club.
Okay, so basically you get to learn to make wine right out of your own home, right? Is that the purpose of the club?
That's the purpose. When we live in such a great area here where we can get some good grapes, but the problem is if you want to buy decent grapes, you really have to buy a ton or maybe a half-ton minimum. And that makes a lot of wine. That's more than most people will want to make. But with our club, we have a grape co-op where the members will pool together and maybe 4 or 5 people will buy 100 pounds each, and then they can get up to 500 pounds or 1,000 pounds and get those minimum orders.
Okay, so I think a lot of people don't realize that you don't have to necessarily have a vineyard in your yard. You can go ahead and just buy these grapes.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
And so how much approximately would it cost to make a bottle of wine?
Oh, I get that question asked a lot. I would say that for 100 pounds of grapes, you're going to spend about $125, $140, okay? And that makes 25 bottles of wine, or roughly 2 cases. So the cost per bottle after you start adding glassware and corks and things like that, maybe about $2, $2.50, maybe $3 at most per bottle.
Oh
And
my
that's pretty
goodness,
good.
that's very reasonable.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you'd probably spend what for that bottle in the store, about $30?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, is wine easy to make?
You know, that wine is easy to make. It's easy to make wine. It's easy to make alcohol. It's a little more difficult to make a really good wine.
Well,
okay?
are you able to tell us a few of the tricks to making good wine? Because I'm sure
I can try.
You've probably lived and learned, like, don't do this, do that, or what are some of the mistakes people make, or what did you learn to be able to be such a good winemaker?
Okay. The most important thing for making good wine is starting with good grapes. Okay.
Good grapes.
You know, if somebody's got grapes that a friend next door has, that they haven't farmed them properly, they never sprayed them, they got mildew on them, and they say at the end of the year, hey, do you want to just take my grapes and make some wine out of them? You can do that, but it's not going to taste really good. Okay. Where when you have grapes that are being more professionally farmed, and they're taking care of them, they're keeping up with making sure there's very minimal mildew, they're picking them at the right right sugar content, the right acid balance, and you're getting good grapes, you're going to have a better chance of making good wine. Okay. Now, so that's number one, start with good grapes. Number two, for someone that's new, it's really good to have somebody that's been doing it before to kind of mentor you through it a little bit and say, okay, these are the steps that you need to do and when you need to do them. Number three, things have to be kept absolutely clean. Okay, you need to have good sanitation, no bacteria getting into the wine. You need to make sure there's no oxygen getting into the wine. A lot of our club members, for flawed wines, they'll have problems with oxidation, which is too much oxygen getting in at certain times, or they'll have problems with bacterial spoilage. So those are the things to avoid. In a lot of ways, the grapes want to turn themselves into wine. So if you get good grapes and then you follow good sanitary practices and you move the liquids here and there when you're supposed to, and you keep everything topped up so there's no oxygen on it, it'll make itself into good wine.
Is it similar to making a cake? So, for example, you have a recipe, put the flour in, put the egg in, put the sugar in. Is it an exact science like that, or do you need to be kind of creative and say, I'm going to add a little more of this, I'm going to tweak that?
You know, that's a good question too, because it's a little of both. Okay, I would say winemaking is both a science and an art. Okay, so you need to play around a little bit. But if you play around too much, if you get too scientific and you try to add too many, tannins, and you try to adjust the acid too much, and you're stuck on what the pH needs to be, and you're adjusting it too much, then it doesn't come out as good. Okay. Whereas if you just let it do itself, though, if you just let it go through without paying any attention to it, it's not going to come out really good either. So it's kind of a balance between the two. You need to know what to look for, when to time it, and then just kind of guide it along to get to where it needs to be.
How long does it take to make a bottle of wine? For example, if you're making white wine or you're making the red wines, is it the same amount of time to make the bottles?
Well,
or is
my kind of pat answer when people ask me that is I think it takes 3 years to make a good bottle of wine.
Is that the red or white?
That's red.
Red.
1 year in the vineyard, 1 year in the wine cellar, and then 1 year in the bottle. Okay, that's when it tends to peak. Okay, so if you can't rush the 1 year in the vineyard, whether it's white wine or red wine, it's going to do that. Okay, the time in the wine cellar, red wines need time to mature, so you want to get them into a barrel usually if you're working in those kind of quantities, or you need to put some kind of oak chips or oak cubes into your glass carboy, which is kind of like the water fillers. Bottled water have those big giant 5-gallon things. You get those in glass. They're called carboys. And they're good for both white and red wines. But with the red wines, you put oak in it, and that needs a chance to kind of infuse into the wine. White wine, though, if you pick it in September or October, you can usually be bottling it by April, May of the following year, right? So for a white wine, from the time you get the grapes until the time you're bottling it, it's maybe about 6 months, okay? Whereas a red wine, it's going to be maybe like a year and 6 months.
Okay. I wonder if there's any classes around where people could learn how to do this other than your club.
You know, Hancock has a lot of great classes. I mean, we got a great resource with the local community college here, and Alfredo Koch or Kosh And Dave Corey now is the one who's taking care of their viticulture, the growing of the grapes. So they're great resources, and the college has a lot of great classes that people can take. Our wine club is actually holding a class, a free class, in conjunction with the Santa Maria Library on July 21st.
July 21st.
And that's a beginner's winemaking class. It doesn't cost anything to attend. It runs from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. It's a 3-hour class. And we pretty much take people through every step that it takes to make wine, from sourcing the grapes to putting the cork on the bottle.
Sounds it. Now, can anybody just show up? Do you need to register in advance, or how does that work?
We'd like people to RSVP through the Santa Maria Library.
Okay.
If we can do that, then we can know we can have notes for them. We can go home with a package of notes. If they don't hear about it and they just happen to show up, that's okay. We're still going to accept them, and we're still going to have the class. We just may not have notes for them at that day. We may have to get those to them later.
Okay. So they're going to learn from the very beginning steps to the end. They're going to know what to buy and what to do, what not to do. And
that's the idea. I mean, I find that we have many of our club members who they've maybe made wine 1 year, but they're just a little shaky on it. Maybe they did it with a mentor and they want to go into a little bit more depth. So the second half of that class is for them, right? It's going to be a little more deep diving on how you do different things. But for somebody that's never made wine before, the first half of the class is much more for them because it's going to give them the bigger overview.
Okay. I think I'd like to go to that class. So it's 1 to 4 at the library.
Yes, it is, on the 21st of July.
Yeah, I never in my wildest dreams would consider making wine because, as I said, I thought you had to own a vineyard, but it sounds like it would be a lot of fun. And probably a lot of fun people in the group as well.
We have a really, really good group. And, like I said, our ages are everything from, 20-somethings to, people that have been in their 70s, right? And we're all over the map. And we try to make our activities within the club both social and educational. Okay?
Oh, nice.
So throughout the year, we start in January with a really big members-only party up at the Avila Beach Yacht Club, right?
Oh.
And that's always in January. It's always a sunny day. It's always just the best way to start the year. And then in February, March, and April, we do a lot more education. So we kind of got 2 programs going. One is up usually at the Lake Marie community. They got a little Lake Marie meeting area there. And we teach people how to evaluate wine.
Oh.
Okay. Most wine drinkers, myself included, when I first started out, you can taste a wine and you can say, I like it or I don't like it.
Right.
But you don't know why you like it or why you don't like it, right? So in these classes in the beginning of the year, we help people identify that. Do you not like it because there's something off? Is there some bad aromas, some bad flavors, some funny taste to it? Do you not like it because it's flat, it's flabby, it doesn't have enough acid? Do you not like it because there's too much residual sugar in it and it's just not quite coming across as a finished wine? Do you not like it because there's some kind of flaw to it? Why don't you like it? And then on the other hand, why do you like something? Well, that's even more complex. The wines that have a lot going on with them, a lot of fruit characteristics, a lot of barrel characteristics with some of the texture and aromas and mouthfeel, some of those type of things, so you can tell why you like something and why you don't. Plus, you'll get a chance of what is a stereotypical Merlot supposed to taste like? What's a stereotypical Syrah supposed to taste like? What's a stereotypical Pinot Grigio supposed to taste like? So we go through that with the club, and that again is open to the public, but usually we don't advertise that. People need to know someone in the club to come to those.
Okay. I'm feeling like it is a bit subjective, though, because you and I could both probably try the same Merlot, and I would think it's all that in a bag of chips, and you might think, I'm not sure if I like this wine. So I guess what I'm really asking you, is there a real science of this is a good wine and this is this is a bad wine? You know what I mean?
There is to a point, okay? And that's kind of what we try to get across with those classes that we do, in that there are certain flaws that some wines will have that does make them a bad wine.
Okay.
I mean, like a flawed wine, pour it down the sink because it's vinegar, it tastes corked. It has a flaw to it. So if you're in a restaurant and you order a wine and they pull the cork and they pour you the glass and you sniff it and you go, this smells like a wet cork or a wet dog or something. It should be sent back because it's not a good wine.
Right.
So you should be able to identify that. Beyond that, if you're looking at two Merlots, for example, you're right. There's a little subjectivity to it. But there are characteristics that should be in a Merlot that you wouldn't find in a Pinot Noir.
Okay.
There's characteristics that you would find in a Chardonnay that you wouldn't find in a Pinot Grigio. So the more you drink wine, if you're open to learning those type of things, that can be a learned trait.
Okay. Well, I see you brought some nice bottles of wine. Now, you won some contests at the fair with your wine. Some gold ribbons, right?
Well, gold medals are hard.
Gold medals.
Gold medals are hard to come by.
I bet.
I have had a few over the years, but I have to say they're hard to come by.
Okay.
But this one here, this is a port. This is actually from our vineyard. It was made in 2010. I actually have my son Forrest there. He's probably about 12 years old. He's picking the first bunch of grapes that ever came out of our vineyard, and he's on that label, and that's a gold medal port.
Oh, okay? Sweet.
So we make, in my vineyard, we make two different grape varietals. We have Syrah, so that's a Syrah port. And then we have Viognier. Viognier is a white wine.
Okay.
And that's my 2016 Viognier. And I believe that was a bronze medal wine.
Bronze, okay.
I think it's a little bit better than that. There's your subjectivity again.
Yeah, see, that's what I mean, subjectivity.
But I like Viogniers, and I think not everybody does.
Okay.
We also have a Syrah Rosé. That's this last year's wine. So you asked how fast you can get them into the bottle. We picked this the end of September last year, and here it is in the bottle ready to drink.
Oh.
That's a silver medal wine, and it's a pretty good Syrah Rosé. I was going on vacation, so I picked it a week earlier than I probably should have. The other ones I have done have been gold medal, so it's a silver. It's a silver. And then this is a Merlot. With my barrel, I have a 30-gallon barrel, and you have to have your barrel filled all the way to the top. So with the drought we've had the last 4 or 5 years, it's been hard to get a big enough harvest out of my own vineyard, which is why we're making the Syrah into rosé, and I buy grapes through our club to put into the barrel. So Merlot is what we made in 2016.
Oh, nice. Okay. Do you have the alcohol content on these too?
No, I don't, but I can kind of guess what it is based upon what the sugar content was when we started.
Okay. I heard that you can't go past 14% in alcohol. Is that right?
That's not right.
You
can get it higher than that.
How high can you go with wine?
For regular yeast, you can get it up to about 16.5%.
And that's probably the red wine, right?
That's a red wine, usually. I mean, the yeast, it doesn't care if it's red or it's white, okay? It's going to consume the alcohol to the point where the alcohol, where the sugar, it's going to consume the sugar to the point where the sugar is gone, okay? But when it gets to be more alcohol in it, it gets a little hard for the yeast to survive.
Okay.
So at a certain point, the yeast is going to die or it's going to stop functioning, where there'll be a little bit of sugar left, or it's gotten to the point where it's done. Honestly, you don't want a little bit of sugar left because as a home winemaker, we can't sterile filter them. We can't put them through a filter where we're going to guarantee that something bad isn't going to happen in the bottle if there's some residual sugar. Okay? A lot of things like sugar to live, so you don't want that to happen. But you can get them up to about 16.5% with maybe even up to 18% with certain yeasts.
Okay.
And then some wines like the port is actually, you add alcohol back to it when it's still fermenting, so there's still some sugar in it, but you add the alcohol back to it so that it kills the fermentation, but the alcohol is higher. So my port here is probably about 22% alcohol.
Oh, my goodness, okay.
Whereas these other ones here are probably around 14%, 14 and a half. And I know that because I know what the sugar content is when I start.
Okay. Well, you sound like you're the type of person that would be a mentor for a lot of people. But my question is, who is your mentor? Do you have somebody that you look to for your answers?
Not so much anymore. You know, when I first started out, I did have somebody that coached me through making my wine. Okay, but at this point, what I like to do is I like to find out from winemakers kind of how they make things, professional winemakers.
Okay.
I mean, I've picked the brains of pretty much everybody in our club at one point or another.
Okay.
But and you always learn from them too. It's like you always learn from your peers because people are always doing things a little bit different. I'm always experimenting with different things too. I'll tell you about that in a bit. But another thing our club does for one of our activities, we'll do something called Tips from the Pro, where we will go to a winery as a group, and it's usually only about maybe 20 people that go on these, are smaller activities. And then we pay the winemaker whatever their normal tasting fee is, but they tell us how they made their wine.
Oh.
Okay, so you learn certain things that you didn't know. And I'll give you a good example of that is I had read that the Australians, when they make their Syrah, will take the skins from the Viognier, throw them into the fermentation, and co-ferment them with the Syrah to give it a little more aromatics and a little bit better mouthfeel and a little bit better color too. So I had been doing that for a few years. The problem was my wine had a flaw in that it got very bitter as it aged.
Oh.
And I recently I basically poured out 10 cases of Syrah that I made because I didn't think it was drinkable. I don't feel it's times life's too short to drink bad wine.
Yeah,
and this was bad wine, right? So I got rid of it, right? But going to one of these talks, it was actually up in Cambria Winery, and the winemaker there was talking about how they made their Syrah and their Viogniers. And I asked them, I said, do you ever put your skins from the Viognier into the Syrah? And she goes, oh, we never do that because the climate here, the cool climate that we have, tends to make the Viognier skins bitter.
Oh.
And it's like, bing, there goes the light bulb.
Oh, what a good tip to learn.
That's why I go to things like that.
Yes.
Great tip. So this year when we make our Syrah, and I'll probably have enough for our barrel this year, so I'm going to make a finished red Syrah, no skins from the Viognier.
Smart. And see, after all these years you've been doing it, you still keep learning
still
new
learn
tricks.
new
There's
things.
always new tricks
There's
to
always.
keep learning.
Exactly.
Do you have a favorite winery that you like to go to? Or there's several different ones, or you don't want to say?
There's so many. It's like we live in such a great area. It's like if I told you the ones that I like, I'd miss 10 others that I also like. So, I would say this area here, go out and explore the wineries. I mean, everybody has their own that they like and some that you may not like as much. So we won't pat anybody in the back, but we won't slap them in the face either today. We'll just say there's great wineries out there. Just go explore.
I probably shouldn't mention names either, but there's certain wineries I really like, and I discovered they're in the same area. They're in Paso, Robles, going west. And I thought, my gosh, all these wineries I like are on the west side. What is it? And then somebody was telling me it's because of the soil. Mm-hmm. That's what can make or break.
Yeah, West Side Zins in Paso is very, very good wines.
That's my favorite.
In fact, the wine I made in 2015 was a Zinfandel, and I sourced the grapes West Side Paso. That's a good wine too.
Oh, I love it.
I didn't bring it, sorry.
So when you were talking about describing, I like the full-bodied, fruit-forward type of wines. Mm-hmm. So the Zinfandels, and this one obviously would be a favorite.
Mm-hmm. Could be.
So, it sounds like you were saying that this would be your favorite?
I like that one, but I also really like my Syrah Rosé. I mean, that's, to me, because I grew the grapes, for both of these two, actually all three of these, because I grew the grapes, I'm very partial to them, okay? They're like my babies, you have to really take care of them. It's a whole lot harder to grow grapes than it is to make wine, right? And I've kind of gotten it down to the point where I'm not running into the problems that I used to. And in growing the grapes, I'm finding out things that have helped a lot. Like one of my patients is a consultant for going to vineyards, and he talks to them about water and nutrition for the plants, right? And I had been telling him that I learned at, again, one of our events to use seaweed on the outside of the leaves, because seaweed has every enzyme that plants need to be able to do their thing, right? So I've been doing that in the leaves, and I've gotten better growth on the leaves. But my patient said, try putting it through your drip system and see what happens. So I did that this year, and oh my gosh, they just exploded. So much bigger growth, much darker leaves. Everything's doing really good. So I'm always learning stuff, but I'm learning a little more, I think, on, well, both ends, both the grape growing and the winemaking.
I was going to say, I bet you have a lot of friends. I bet you, sometimes you think, I don't want to mention what I do because they probably all think, ooh, we could drink his wine.
Yeah, I still have to have people help pick, so we still have our harvest parties where we give everybody a bottle of Fred's Red when they leave. Would you like to open one?
Sure.
You want
if
the port?
I get a choice, I like the port wine.
All right. Port wine's going to be sweet.
I know.
And you picked one of my good wines.
I like ports. That's one of my favorites. So I like the full-bodied. I guess you call that full-bodied.
Yes,
obviously.
it is. It's got some residual sugar to it. It's been in the bottle a long time. You can see how dark that cork is.
It smells really nice.
There you go.
Thank you.
And I did grow these grapes, 2010. You like that, huh?
This is awesome. This is awesome.
That is good. It gets better every time I try it.
It's wonderful.
One of the problems with home winemaking is you don't end up having a lot of your wine after a while. Unless you make larger and larger quantities every year, there's a point where you run out of all the good stuff because you drank it all.
I can imagine.
So.
Well, we're about ready to close up here, my friend. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we close today?
I can't think of anything. I think we've really had a really good conversation, honestly. The club is a great opportunity. cchva.org is where you'll find us on the web. You will also have an opportunity to attend our class in July if anybody would like to do that. That's open to the public. Just call the library to RSVP. And we'd love to meet some of your viewers and introduce them to the wonderful art of home winemaking.
Well, I'd definitely like to go. Do you want to go, Dave?
Sure, I'll go.
Okay.
Well, I got two in my audience then. That's good.
Stephen, do you? Alan?
Yes.
Oh, good. We have a tribe going.
All right. Cheers.
Well, cheers. Thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. And
yeah, it was
thank
fun.
you for the
I enjoyed
wine.
It. All right.
All right. We'll see you Saturday.
You bet. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Woo! Well, thanks for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed it. And my last thoughts are, don't let anyone ever take your mojo. Woohoo! And have a great week.